Friends, welcome back to the Rift. We often hear the statistic that flying is the safest way to travel. The media highlights the rare crash, but statistically, you are far more likely to meet a serious end driving to the airport than flying across the country. The numbers don't lie. For every 100 million commercial passengers, only about 2 fatalities occur. It is a tiny fraction, and that is exactly why when an aircraft does vanish, or a pilot meets an inexplicable fate, people demand answers. Tonight, we are heading to the rugged, remote coast of Scotland, the Isle of Mull. This is a place of ancient forests, dark, foreboding hills, and a history steeped in Celtic mystery. We are going to examine a disappearance that, in my years of studying these cases, exhibits almost every single confounding factor we see in the missing 411 files. This is the story of a successful businessman, a minor cut, a missing plane, and a body discovered on a frequently searched hill. The man at the center of this enigma was Peter Gibbs, a five-year-old property developer, a driven man with a no-nonsense reputation, and a skilled pilot. His passion for flying dated all the way back to the end of World War II. On Christmas Eve, 1975, after a long day of business, Gibbs decided to take his personal plane out for a quick, unplanned night flight. It was a sudden, determined impulse, and the kind of whim that defies logic. The Glen Forsa Hotel staff tried to warn him. They raised serious concerns about the area's notorious downdrafts, and the critical fact that there were no landing lights to guide his return. But Gibbs, a man accustomed to getting his way, reminded them he wasn't asking for permission from anyone. The sky that night was utterly black and moonless. His only landing aid, according to him, was his own flashlight. His girlfriend, Felicity Granger, was stationed on the airstrip, tasked with providing the only visual reference he would have to land. She was his sole beacon in the overwhelming darkness. At 9:30 p.m., the plane taxied and took off. A hotel guest named David Howarth witnessed the event and later described the takeoff as absolutely perfect. He detected no signs of malfunction, no struggle, no problems whatsoever with the aircraft or the pilot. The plane lifted off and vanished into the heavy, damp air of the Christmas Eve night. Felicity waited for approximately half an hour, holding her flashlight steady, but Peter did not return. The weather, already poor, was rapidly deteriorating into a thick, blinding fog that would swallow a small aircraft whole. The local police were called, but the conditions became so perilous that they were forced to make a difficult and agonizing decision: call off the search until the light of Christmas morning. The investigation into what happened to Peter Gibbs began in earnest on Christmas Day. RAF and Navy helicopters scoured the water with sonar. Hundreds of determined volunteers searched the entire island on foot, covering every known trail and hidden nook. Yet, for 4 months, nothing was found. No plane, no wreckage, no oil slick, and critically, no Peter Gibbs. The mystery deepened 4 months later, in April of the following year. About a mile from the Glen Forsa Hotel, on a frequently traveled, prominent hill, a local shepherd named Donald McKinnon discovered the body of Peter Gibbs. The body was fully clothed and located in plain view, about 400 feet from the base of the hill. Now, if you are familiar with the missing 411 cases, this should immediately set off every alarm bell you have. This hill was part of the initial search. Shepherds, the locals confirmed, traversed this very ground every single day. Yet, for 4 long months, a fully clothed corpse lay on a prominent hill, completely undetected by anyone. That, my friends, is simply not possible under normal circumstances. Furthermore, the body's condition was scientifically baffling. There were no signs of advanced decomposition. There was no animal interference. The medical examiner confirmed he had died on the night of the disappearance, and the only injury was a minor cut on one of his legs. This challenges all conventional theories. If the plane crashed into the sea, he would have had to swim to shore, scale a sheer cliff, cross a main road, and walk uphill for a quarter of a mile. He would have been suffering from exposure, exhaustion, and potentially major trauma. But he had none of that. In fact, there was no trace of seawater or marine microorganisms found anywhere on his skin or his clothes. The evidence suggests he never touched the ocean, or that some kind of preservation occurred that defies the limits of normal decomposition. This leaves us with a terrifying and persistent question, one that haunts many of my cases. If he was not on that hill, where was Peter Gibbs for those first 4 months? It is a concept I have long referred to as the waiting period, a dark period where a victim is simply not where they should be, seemingly defying all known reality. The other major question, of course, was the fate of the aircraft itself. Given the lack of trauma on Gibbs, the assumption that the plane was at the bottom of the sea seemed increasingly unlikely. That changed 11 years later. In September 1986, 2 brothers, Richard and John Grieve, were clam fishing off the coast of Oban. They claimed to have found a small red and white plane about 100 feet down, far beneath the waves. They even claimed they could see the registration number. The plane they described was severely damaged, wings sheared off, a wheel ripped from its housing, and the engine found a short distance away. This was the scene of a terrifying, violent impact. But the most crucial, baffling detail of their story was this: both cockpit doors were reportedly locked from the inside. The only theoretical way out would have been through a ragged hole in the windscreen. Think about that for a moment. A plane violently crashes into the sea, yet the pilot is later found on a hill with only a minor cut. And if the plane was locked from the inside, how did Gibbs or anyone else manage to exit before or after the crash? To complicate matters further, the Royal Navy admitted in 2013 to discovering a downed aircraft off Oban, supporting the idea that a plane was out there. However, that wreckage was estimated to be largely intact, completely contradicting the brothers' violent crash description. We have 2 potential planes, 2 vastly different conditions, and a pilot whose body contradicts the violent fate of the first one. Nothing in this case aligns, and when the physical evidence defies logic, we must turn to the theories that acknowledge the impossible. The most conventional theory relies on his pre-flight statement to his girlfriend that he would throttle right back and jump to safety. If he successfully jumped out, it explains the minor injury and the lack of sea damage. But this still fails to explain the body's ultimate location. Why walk past the road, past the sheer cliff, past the hotel where his worried girlfriend waited, only to lie down and die on an exposed, cold hill? It screams of the extreme, paradoxical disorientation we frequently see in my cases. Now, let us apply the missing 411 filter to the Isle of Mull. We have inexplicable disorientation near a known body of water in rough, remote terrain. We have the delayed discovery of a body in a previously searched area, perfectly preserved. This area is also highly significant. The Isle of Mull is a land with deep, ancient Celtic history where the boundary between the natural and the supernatural is often blurred. Some believe ancient pathways or portals exist in these remote regions. Could Peter Gibbs have encountered a phenomenon similar to what some have reported in remote wilderness areas? A sudden, powerful, and targeted disorientation, something that essentially drew him away from the light of the hotel and compelled him to lie down on that lonely hill. I propose an unsettling hypothesis. Peter Gibbs, after a minor accident or jump, was immediately encountered by a non-human force, perhaps an element from the ancient stories of the land, an inexplicable entity that patrols the temporal borders of these remote areas. This force took the aircraft, severely damaging or moving it. It then quickly incapacitated Peter Gibbs, holding or concealing his body for those 4 months. Perhaps in a bizarre, localized dimensional shift. Then, at a precise moment when the search had long since ceased, the body was quietly, meticulously returned to the hill. It was left in a prominent, almost taunting location, free of decomposition because it was somehow preserved during its time away. It sounds truly fantastical. But when the physical evidence, the pristine body, the minor cut, the delayed discovery on a searched hill defies all forensic and survival logic. We have to look outside the boundaries of a simple accident. The Great Mull Air Mystery fits too many of the key parameters of my missing 411 files to be easily dismissed. A flawless takeoff, a baffling death, an impossible location, and a plane that may or may not have been violently locked from the inside. We may never know the truth of Peter Gibbs's final flight, but the questions remain. What happened in that black Scottish sky on Christmas Eve? And where was Peter Gibbs for those missing 4 months? Friends, thank you for joining me on the Rift for this deeply unsettling case. What do you think happened to Peter Gibbs? Was it a botched bailout, or does this mystery, like so many others, hint at something deeper, something ancient, that lurks in the shadows of our remote wilderness? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember to like this video and subscribe to Mystery Rift for more investigative deep dives into the unexplained. Until next time, be good to yourselves, be careful out there, and never stop looking for the truth.